Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, 6 Americans are dead and bombs are falling on our consulates and bases and allies because Trump started what he has now said could be a, in his words, forever war. This is the same president who I quote, "I'm not going to start wars, I'm going to end them," unquote. This is a president who has said America first means no more wars. This is a president who has betrayed. He has betrayed those people who voted for him, expecting him to keep us out of wars. Because he started this war as a matter of choice, because he wanted to. Because we have heard over and over again that there was no imminent threat, which is the legal criteria. There was no congressional authorization. And even though Trump betrayed his own commitments, his own voters, Trump betrayed them and betrayed those Republicans who thought he was going to keep us out of war. So you would think that Republicans who control this House would bring us back into a session so we could address this war, so we could discuss, is it legitimate? What can we do? How do we exercise our Article 1 power? Why don't you all want to exercise the power that was given to you by your voters? But that's not what we're doing today. Instead, we are here on a rule that has one bill. And that bill is so important. That's the only thing we're going to cover. But guess what? We already did it. This is a rerun of a bad movie. It is a rerun because there is nothing in this bill that is not already in the bill that, as the gentleman pointed out, was already passed. The only thing that has changed from when we last passed this very same bill a few weeks ago was that ICE and CBP have killed, arrested, detained, and terrorized more American citizens. When we last passed this bill, Alex Pretti was alive. Alex Pretti had not been killed. Alex Pretti's Second Amendment rights were still being honored. That's what has changed. What has changed is more people have died in ICE custody. What has changed is it has gotten only worse. We have seen ICE officials have to walk back their lies about their encounters with citizens who they have shot and beat up and arrested. That's the only thing we have seen since this bill was last passed. And you know what? The reality is, the only way to get DHS funded all together in a single bill is for the White House, Senate, and House to come to an agreement. And they are in negotiations to do that. But this is the kind of thing where even though negotiations are going on, the House just wants to do the same thing over and over again. And you know what? I remember that quote of when you do the same thing over and over again with the same results. It's actually a little bit of madness. But I put up this letter because while House Republicans kind of don't understand where Americans are, this 7-year-old named Connor does. Connor sent me this letter where he says, ICE, no money. He put a whole bunch of zeros after. He doesn't realize that they get a lot more money than the $1 billion that he set out here. Because as my colleagues noted, they're already fully funded. They've got all that money from the H.R. 1. And what we suggested, what Democrats suggested, since they already acknowledge, he said it on the floor, they're fully funded, why don't we just pass a bill that funds FEMA, that funds Coast Guard, that funds these critical agencies over which there is no debate and no controversy and no need for negotiations. They rejected that amendment last night because if they really cared about funding these critical agencies, they'd say, let's fund them and let's take up the issues of how do we make sure that ICE and CBP protect Americans. Because not only is Connor worried, but a parent told me when I was back home that her child asked her two questions as they drove home from school one day. One question was, "Mom, are Alfs real?" And the second question was, "Mom, what do I do if ICE comes for me? What do I do if ICE comes from you?" This is a little Latina student, a citizen, somebody who has been in this country, her family for generations, but they are terrified because if you look Latino, you are at risk, and they are unwilling to put any protections in to protect our families, unwilling to put any protections in to say, don't go into our schools, don't go into our hospitals, don't go into our churches. Preserve the places where people should be able to go somewhere to feel safe. For example, in Clovis, New Mexico, ICE broke a car window at a health clinic, dragged the father away. The mother had to run into the health clinic to make sure that there were no glass shards on the baby's skin because that window had been shattered. This is the kind of activity that they are condoning. But that baby was lucky because we know that there are babies like 2-month-old Juan Nicolas in Texas who was sick in detention and sick with bronchitis and almost near death, was deported across the border without any money, without any people that he would know of. Thank heaven the goodness of the American people helped that baby out. And I could tell story after story that should make anybody who has a heart or conscience or moral values based on any of our faith traditions cry and say, this is not an America we believe in. At least 3,800 children under age 18, including 20 infants, were held in detention under the Trump administration in 2025 alone. The cruelty continues far beyond those thousands of kids. And it's not just that they killed citizen Alex Pretti and citizen Renee Good. It's a pattern and practice of ICE hurting our communities and violating the Constitution. Americans who believe in law and order, respect for constitutional rights, who don't want government overreach, they should be and are indeed outraged. But today, Republicans are once again demanding more money for the Department of Homeland Security's ICE and PBP, which they acknowledge has already been fully funded. In fact, we know that $150 billion of the money that we already sent to DHS remains available to them. But now, as we heard, they're trying to justify funding DHS by pointing to a war that this president started. Without a clear strategy, without the support of the American people. And Trump's chaos is everywhere. And Trump's chaos comes with a price. And it's Americans who pay that price. Chaos abroad, chaos Congress did not authorize, and chaos at home. And let's be clear what's happening. While families are worried about rising costs, while service members' lives are at risk, Republicans want to write another blank check to an agency that's already operating with historic, unprecedented funding. How much is this chaos costing us? That's the question we should be asking. We know just one piece of this war. 3 F-15 aircraft shot down cost $300 million. You know what that $300 million could do? It could fund 23 years of the Gabriela Miller Kids First Pediatric Research Program, 3 years of childhood cancer and birth defects for just those 3 F-15s that they put at risk. Or the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline for a year to connect Americans with life-saving services and a compassionate counsel. 3 of those planes would pay for another year of the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, a fund that Trump wanted to zero out. He wanted to zero out this fund, but think about it. Those CDFIs, what does that mean? Your credit unions, your places where you get your loans for your cars, for your appliances, to help with your home. That's what he's willing to do, because everything comes at a cost. And they are willing to pay money for this war of choice, and that money could be better spent at home, bringing down the cost of living for Americans. And we know that 60% of Americans support redirecting ICE funding to Medicaid because people want health care and stability, not raids and abuse and chaos. Republicans keep burning money. They keep burning money. They have that $4 trillion debt from their big, beautiful bill. And we know the last time a Republican took us into war in the Middle East, it cost trillions in our deficit. They're doing it again. There they go. They're at it again. And what Democrats are asking for, before we send more ICE funding, is what all law enforcement uses: mandatory body cameras, judicial warrants before you break down somebody's door. Judicial warrants before you break down somebody's door. Every law enforcement in America does that. Why can't they? No masks. What law enforcement officers go around in masks except for theirs? No targeting of schools, hospitals, houses of worship, or polling places. Sensible, community-driven policies. And we are also asking that ICE follow the same Constitution principles that every other law enforcement agency follows. You can't just beat up, shoot, and kill people. And it's not just Democrats saying this. Catholic bishops from border states and beyond are pleading with Congress to restore protections at places of worship, schools, and healthcare facilities so families can seek care, learn, and pray without fear. If Republicans truly cared about security, they would support these kind of reforms. Why don't you want to let people pray without fear? I ask. But Trump wanted a Department of War so he could wage war. Now he wants a reckless ICE to have dangerous amounts of monies. But Americans don't have to choose between national security and safety and constitutional protections. We can have all three. It just takes courage. It takes courage over chaos, but not blank checks and not endless wars. It's time to restore accountability before we write another blank check with a lot more zeros than poor Connor could even imagine. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentlewoman reserves the balance of her time.